Hello, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Douglas Johnson. I'm a certified yoga teacher, Kitlabi inquiries facilitator, an ordained minister, and also a sound healer and kirtan artist. So if you're interested in this kind of content, please subscribe, like the video if you get something from it, and leave a comment if you have a question, and share with friends and family who you think might be interested in this kind of content. So today I want to speak about asking for another way to perceive things. And this is, I think, my opinion, a very, very important concept to grasp. And A Course in Miracles is a great source if you're interested in learning more about this concept. A lot of what I'm going to share with you comes from reading A Course in Miracles and studying that scripture. It's one that I really get a lot from, and I study it often, and I've read it many, many times from cover to cover. And so it's a very rich source of spiritual guidance. So if you haven't ever checked that out, I do recommend checking A Course in Miracles out. So asking for another way of seeing things. I've mentioned this in a previous, I think in my last video, as a matter of fact, about facts and judgment. And so again, a fact is just something like I broke my leg or I got fired. Judgment is the moral or good, bad weight that we place on these things, which is different. Different people might have a different perspective on whether an event was good or bad, pleasurable or unpleasurable, whether you're suffering or not. So this is very important for us to really understand when we're looking for the end of our suffering as a human being, and to enjoy this experience of being human. And this is really the essence of what I teach. I'm not really that interested in going to other realms. I'm not really that interested in communicating with disembodied spirits. I'm not really interested in trying to become some person's idea of a perfect person. These things just, I don't think are important. They don't interest me. What I'm interested in is helping you enjoy your human experience fully. But I do want to draw a distinction there between what I'm speaking about and teaching and hedonism. So when I talk about enjoying, I'm not talking about, well, I like chocolate cake, so I'm going to eat as much chocolate cake as I can, or just seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. If you want to hear a little more about that, I talk a bit about devesha and avoidance and attraction, raga and devesha in yoga. So this concept of I just avoid what I don't like and I run after what I like, and that's going to bring me happiness. That formula doesn't work. And if you haven't figured that out yet, then you're probably in the wrong place. This video probably won't be very helpful. But many people have figured this out. Maybe when they were very young, they tried that. They tried drugs because it felt good. They tried alcohol because they felt good while they were drinking. They tried sex with random people because that felt good. They tried buying a house because that felt good. They started a family because they thought that that would make them feel complete or whole. They tried all the things, and they eventually get to the point where, and again, it's different for everybody. Some people don't have to try many things and the light bulb goes off, and then others, they get to the end of their life and they're still trying. But if you're here, it's very likely that you've tried and you've realized, at least to some degree, that seeking pleasure, maximizing pleasure, and avoiding pain just doesn't actually lead to happiness. And that's what I'm really talking about, is kind of a lasting, transcendent happiness. So in this life, if we're going to enjoy this life, in my experience, the way we enjoy it is by connecting with our source, our true nature, spirit, and seeing things from that perspective. So most of us, by the time we are an adult, we have been trained and taught and really had one way of seeing the world drilled into our mind, and that is the perspective of the ego. And so the perspective of the ego is very much based on senses and what we can sense and perceive with our senses. It de-emphasizes or completely ignores that there is a deeper reality or law that is influencing what actually manifests with our senses. It also tends to ignore the fact that, again, interpretation is usually involved with, or I'm going to say always involved with, judgment. So again, I broke my leg, as I shared in my previous talk. Is that good or bad? It really depends on so many factors. So declaring something good, declaring something bad, this is only really possible from a very limited perspective. Now, source or true nature, enlightened perspective, spirit, it isn't limited in the same way that the ego is. And so it will see things in a very different light, something that our ego perceives as bad or terrible or the end, our spirit sees in a very different light. This not only includes events, but it also includes people, like a difficult boss or difficult sibling or someone else. These people, these events are seen as lessons or teachers from the way of spirit. And when we finally learn the lesson, then we usually look back with gratitude. We don't feel antagonistic towards these people or these events anymore. We actually are grateful. And sometimes there's also compassion in there as well. If someone treated us poorly, then we might realize that that individual was also treated poorly or is suffering, and that is what motivated their behavior toward us. That's why they didn't maybe treat us in the best way. But again, from this perspective, we usually also see that that treatment was part of a bigger unfoldment that has guided us or brought us to the present moment. And in the present moment, we realize that everything is as it needs to be. It's perfect. And there is joy and there is peace here and now. So very, very important for us. So what A Course in Miracles emphasizes is that in any given moment, when a judgment arises, you have a choice to invite in this other perspective, and that the Holy Spirit, the connection with the divine, if you will, this connection with this other way of seeing things is within each and every one of us. So as a spiritual teacher, I will try and speak about this and try and point the way to this inside yourself, but all of us have it. It's not that a spiritual teacher has a special connection that no one else has. Everyone has access to it A spiritual teacher maybe has just been in touch with it longer, can maybe hear it more clearly, and has perhaps learned to filter out the ego a little better than your average person. And that's why they're able to help others with their teaching. So what A Course in Miracles tells us is that the ego always speaks first, and it speaks loudest. It's also, again, the voice in our head that society, culture, parents, teachers, conventional wisdom is echoing in the world. And I'm generalizing here, so maybe your parents were enlightened, very, very rare. Even if they are enlightened, it still may have not have come through and rubbed off on you. You may still have interpreted their words through the ego. So is it possible to grow up and not develop an ego? I don't honestly know. I suspect that it is, but what I see in the world is very few people, if any, are able to get through childhood without developing some of this egoic perspective and embracing some of this perspective. So that perspective, again, emphasizes action. It emphasizes judgment. It emphasizes chasing after what pleases us and avoiding that which is unpleasant or difficult or doesn't feel very good. And as I'm saying, there's another way of seeing things. So this is where teachers will talk about the still, quiet voice. And in Christian scripture, they talk, there's the passage, "Be still and know I am God." Okay, so this is a very powerful concept in my view. We're running around the world, we're trying to enjoy life. And most of us are trying to do this with money, influence, power, manipulation, exchange with others. And what spiritual teaching and teachers, and if it's truly spiritual, and I don't mean to sound judgmental or to put anybody down, but the way that I'm defining spirituality and what's true spirituality is it's not about those conventional ways of going about things. It is about another way of seeing things and another way of working with reality. And in my experience, this is the only way that truly leads to lasting peace and joy. Otherwise, yes, you may be able to manipulate appearances and things with action, but in my experience, it just doesn't lead to lasting peace and joy. There might be a temporary, yes, I'm winning kind of feeling, and then very quickly that goes away. Or you find that the burden of sustaining that egoic action is just exhausting, and you end up with a heart attack or stroke or some other issue that comes from all the stress that comes with trying to uphold that kind of a action that isn't divinely inspired. Okay, so again, in spirit, inspired, this is the root of that word. So we can invite in this other perspective, but usually, again, this is going to require pausing, getting still, getting quiet. It doesn't necessarily need to take a long time, but just, again, the ego speaks first and loudest. So my boss treats me unfairly at work. It feels as though I'm being treated unfairly. The snap judgment, I can't believe this. My boss always does this to me. I'm never appreciated, all of these things. This is a very rich moment, actually, because one of the things I've been interested in lately has been manifestation. And according to all the people that teach conscious manifestation. They say that your inner dialogue and your assumptions are really the most important thing. So again, if my boss treats me poorly, unfairly, in the ego's perspective, and the ego comes back with all this judgment, right? They always do this to me. I'm never treated fairly. Life is so unfair. I'm never appreciated for my talents, whatever it might be. Then this is telling us a lot of what is in the unconscious there, not only by what is being presented in life, but also by the inner dialogue. So how can we change it? Well, again, we can get still, we can get quiet, and we can invite in another way of seeing it. And we can ask Spirit, again, that connection, that part of us that stays connected with the divine perspective, which is unlimited and loving and forgiving. Always, we can connect with that and invite in another perspective. So in this instance, a few things that might come back from inviting in that other perspective is, wow, my boss must really be stressed out. I wonder what's on her plate. Maybe corporate is putting a lot of pressure on her to perform or improve what's going on here. Another thing might come back is that maybe there's truth. Maybe they criticized something you did in a project, and maybe this is actually a pattern. Maybe she said something like, you know, your ideas are really brilliant, but your projects always come in late. And, you know, that's unacceptable. And if this happens again, we're going to have to let you go. So was it late or not? Or whatever it might be. Again, it might be something subjective where it is difficult to say in any kind of definitive way, this is the case or that is the case. But sometimes we actually can, if we look at facts. Maybe we don't like that we're being punished. Maybe we don't like that we're being criticized, but is the criticism true? If someone's like, you know, you're always late, I don't appreciate that, and you get upset, is it true that you're always late? Are you really perceiving things as they are? Why is this person saying that? Okay? So, inviting in another way of seeing things and inviting in forgiveness. Again, Jesus taught a lot about forgiveness and non-judgment. They go together really, really well, because true forgiveness, according to Course, is realizing that what I thought happened didn't actually happen. And you could say this is a whole nother level, that when someone has wronged us or hurt us or did something that we judge as harmful or hurtful, what we want to do is reaffirm the power of Spirit. If that's what we really are, then we're above harm, we're above being hurt. And it's not to deny the human experience, the temporal experience, but the Course says right at the beginning that that which is real cannot be harmed, right? And that which is unreal doesn't exist. And therein lies the peace of God. So if I'm being harmed, I'm being hurt, then again, the perspective of truth or spirit or an enlightened perspective is that, well, that isn't really real in the ultimate sense. It doesn't mean we need to ignore it or deny it, but we need to realize that there's another way of seeing this experience, and we invite in that way of seeing it. And I know these can be challenging things to practice. It can feel so real when we're in a moment of suffering or pain, that no, there is no other way to interpret this. There is no other way to see this. But there always is. And this is the beauty of what our true nature is. Our true nature has this ability to take on different perspectives. What we call ego is when our true nature gets very hyper-focused on one perspective and believes that that is truth. And it, in a sense, forgets its ability to take on different perspectives. And this goes back to what I was saying about happiness earlier. Lasting happiness, lasting peace, lasting joy, enjoying the ride of being human. It's up to us to consciously decide and to choose how we will see our life and what's happened in it. And we can see it in a way that brings us joy and peace and actually turns us into a light for others, where we are like a beacon of light. We are feeling divine love. We're feeling connection with Source. We're feeling that we are an extension of love. And from that, we act. From that, we think. From that, we speak. Everything comes from that. This is in opposition to the egoic perspective, where we're limited, we're small, we're weak, we're frail, we're vulnerable. So again, Course in Miracles says right at the beginning, therein lies the peace of God, of knowing what you really truly are, that which is created by divinity is indestructible. And anything that's destructible isn't really real. So what's destructible? My thoughts, my feelings, right? They change. My body is changing all the time. So a very important spiritual concept is disidentification with the forms, which are, by nature, they change. And by nature, they are vulnerable. But connecting with what we really are, spirit, an extension of love itself, when we connect with that, then we allow the forms to play out the way that they are going to play out. And we enjoy the play. It's a lot like watching a movie. And some of you have maybe listened to or heard me talk about the movie analogy. I don't want to do that, get into that today, but just very briefly, the way we enjoy a movie is by being invested enough, but not identified with the characters in the movie, right? If I completely identify with Ethan Hunt in Mission Impossible and he's hanging off a cliff and facing death, I'm going to have a very adverse reaction in my body, right? I might even have a heart attack. All kinds of negative things might happen. I might be traumatized by that, okay? If all of a sudden I'm put in the place of some character that I'm watching that's going through a absolutely horrific experience, that actually might psychologically or physically damage me. So what makes a movie enjoyable is not identifying with the characters completely, but some, right? If you watch a movie and the screenwriting is very poor, the dialogue is awful, the special effects are unbelievable, the plot is implausible, you won't enjoy it because you can't identify at all. You can't believe at all, right? It requires a certain amount of belief to enjoy. So life is very much the same way for spirit. Spirit is here to enjoy the play, to enjoy the unfolding of events. And if we could step back from the movie, the play, Spirit's take on it is like after you see a great movie. It doesn't matter if the movie was sad or happy or whatever it was. If it was a great movie, you're like, wow, that was a great film, right? That was a great film. It took you on a journey, on an adventure. Now, if you were too identified during the movie, if you were identified with the characters, then yeah, you couldn't enjoy the bigger plot, the bigger unfolding, because again, you may just be really identified in one perspective and too caught up in the play of good and bad and what you're wanting to happen versus what you don't want to happen. And again, if it's completely unbelievable, this is like someone who maybe is trying to deny reality completely. They no longer enjoy this life. They want to stay in meditation. They want to leave the world of forms. They want to stay in an ashram or a monastery. For them, life is painful, life is suffering, and they're trying to escape that and get away from that. So for me, again, and what I teach, it is about balance and not identifying too much with one perspective. And this is where today's talk comes in. Again, it's up to me. It's up to me in the moment, right? In a moment to decide that I will invite in another perspective. When should you do this? When you're suffering. Anytime you're suffering. Anytime you find yourself in judgment of somebody else. And I'll include in this even feeling sorry for someone else. Sometimes people on a spiritual path, they get very righteous and they believe they know better, they know what's spiritual or whatever it is, and oh, I feel sorry for this person, I feel sorry for that person. You don't need to feel sorry for them. You're not doing them or yourself any favors by doing that, okay? So you don't need to feel sorry for them, but compassion. You can feel compassionate. Again, you can understand. You can relate. You can forgive. And again, forgiveness from the perspective of Course in Miracles is seeing that what you thought happened isn't what happened. So I thought they hurt me. I thought they rejected me. I thought they didn't appreciate me. I thought they didn't love me. I thought they disrespected me. And again, inviting in a different perspective. Now, what this can start to do, and of course talks about it, is that it can actually begin to change our experience of reality over time. The Course says that actually we send out what we want to see. We almost have like messengers. So if I want to see, not on a conscious level, but an unconscious level, if I want to believe in this world of pain and suffering and injustice, then that is what the senses will pull in a sense. And on the contrary, if I'm like, no, I don't want to see that world. I want to see a world of love and fairness and justice and where people are experiencing the joy of life, then that is what the senses will bring back to me. So this is a great way of knowing what's going on in your unconscious. What kind of world are you experiencing? And again, I'm not talking about surface. On the surface, we can all agree the world might seem really messed up, but that's what spiritual teaching is about. It's not about surface level. It's not about conventional wisdom. It's not about reinforcing the viewpoint of the ego. We all know what that is. We don't need spirituality for that, okay? So I'm not trying to deny what the senses see. What I am saying is there is an alternate view that comes from a deeper truth, okay? And that's what we're trying to do with spirituality. Again, from the egoic perspective, we say, well, what's in it for me? Well, my experience is lasting peace and joy, bliss, becoming your best version of yourself. Because as much as you think that being afraid and seeing the world as an awful place might motivate you to be a better person, it really isn't. You may see yourself as some kind of white knight saving others, but that's probably not how others see you. Others probably see you as manipulative, as trying to push something on them that they're not really asking for, as you seeing yourself as some kind of a savior or white knight that no one is asking for. So again, how we perceive ourselves, if we're on some kind of mission to save others, isn't necessarily how others will perceive us. Keep that in mind. So again, inviting in another perspective, very, very powerful practice, and it is a practice. And like most of the practices I share with you in these talks, these are things that you can do at any time. You don't need a yoga mat. You don't need a meditation cushion. You don't need anything, just as you go through your day. Now, I will say this, that meditation and yoga will help you hear that inner voice more clearly, more easily. It will help you get connected. So these are things that I teach and I value highly, and I recommend that you start doing. But in these talks, I like to share other things than just talking about meditation. More and more, there's scientific evidence of the benefits of meditation and yoga. And so there's a lot of literature and science and statistics and encouragement to do these practices. So if you're listening to this, I'm almost assuming you're already meditating, you're already doing some yoga, you're probably on a spiritual path. So these things I'm sharing with you, these kind of practices that you use during your day, these things are, for me, when you, in a sense, have already laid that foundation. Do you have to meditate or do yoga to do these other practices? No, you don't. So they are things that you can pick up just on their own. But in my view, these things tend to reinforce one another. So doing postural yoga, doing seated meditation, doing kirtan, chanting, singing, listening to talks like this one, these are all really, really great to do all of them. In modern yoga, many people choose one. They say, oh, well, I like doing postures. I don't like singing, so I'm just going to do postures. But my teachers said that that's not really the best way to approach things, and I'm in full agreement. I don't recommend you limit yourself in that way. If you're getting a lot from doing yoga postures, then why not assume you'll probably get as much or more from chanting. You may not like chanting as much at first, but even that can be an indication of that you'll actually get more from that practice. So very often we don't get the most from the practices that we are drawn to initially. It often might be a practice that we initially are very hesitant to do. All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please like, subscribe, comment, share. And if you'd like to help support me in making this content, then consider making a $5 donation for a video that you've watched to the end, or becoming a patron on Patreon. And all the links are below if you want to explore those options. As always, everyone, thank you. Namaste. Have a beautiful day.